Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be here today. This is my third Data Innovation Summit, so thanks for coming. Let's just jump in. How many of you recognize this iconic scene? My children have told me it kind of dates me a little, but I think most of those in the room recognize this. Well, this is the scene in which Charlie, the instructor at Top Gun, tells the students about the limitations of the Soviet MiG. And at this point, Maverick turns to Goose and starts to whisper, and Charlie says, "Excuse me, Lieutenant, is there something wrong?" And we all know what Maverick says, right? He says, "Yes, ma'am, the data is inaccurate." Well, imagine that scenario. You're up against your fiercest competitor, and you find out that the data that you have on them is inaccurate. That information that you're being fed about what you need to do and how you should do it isn't correct. Well, we all know that in today's competitive environment, we can't afford this scenario. We're increasingly dependent on data today, its accuracy, and the insights that are derived from it, and the decisions that we make based on those decisions, based on that information. And that's even more so as we're entering this new era, as I call from insights to assistance. So we know that classical AI forecasts sales based on hundreds of data points. And then some organizations were able to leverage web and cloud scale to get a better understanding of customer behavior, a better understanding of that demand based on millions of transactions. But now we're in an era where we're not only predicting what's going to happen, but we're delivering those messages, that we're generating those messages that we're going to deliver to customers based on billions of input. And that's exciting enough, but what's even more exciting is this new technology speaks our language. It's accessible to anyone across an organization. It's not just accessible to the technical people. And that's what's really driving adoption and really changing the paradigm in which we exist. We found, so rewind about a year, and a McKinsey study estimated just months after the launch of ChatGPT that 87% of millennials said that they were using generative AI, including for work purposes. 51% said they were using it regularly. Now, stay back a year ago, and at the same time, an MIT study showed that many data and IT leaders within organizations didn't really know that that was going on. And many of them were not necessarily preparing for the onslaught of the use of that data. So what we'd actually seen was what some people have referred to as an iPhone moment of AI. This has entered the enterprise kind of through the back door, and we really needed to catch up in order to get our foundations in place and make it and enable the effective use of the new technology. So that was then, and fortunately we have accelerated, we have prepared, and people have put in place the proper foundation. So after talking to a lot of data execs, what I wanted to do today is talk through some of the steps that they describe as how they plan, execute, and scale their AI programs within their organizations. I don't like to refer to this as a maturity model because I don't feel like people move from one step or stage to the other. It's really cumulative. You never stop evangelizing or experimenting as you operationalize or as you expand within the organization, or even as you transform the organization. Part of that transformation is continuing to evangelize and experiment. So let's just go through a few of these. Starting with evangelism. You know, we heard about that from Carl and Rick this morning about evangelizing and helping people understand what AI is, what's needed to deliver AI effectively, what everyone in an organization's role is. Also, interestingly, Oscar talked about the evangelizing and setting expectations among the consumers of Spotify and how you do that and how that changes their behavior. So evangelism is really important. It's about getting those messages out, the right messages, the right language, to the right people. At Air Canada, Beth Quinton, the CDO, says that it's, you know, she really hits on how important it is to get that correct message out to people. And she says she tells business leaders in clear terms, there will be winners and losers, and we want to be a winner. So it's also about setting expectations, as I mentioned, and I really loved this quote. Board members love AI, but they think it's that magic ball that you can shake and get an answer out of. They don't necessarily understand what it takes to scale across an organization. So part of that evangelism is setting those expectations. But it's also encouraging people to experiment. It's casting a very wide net to get people to ideate, to get people to uncover use cases that you can apply these new technologies to. So at Siemens Energy, they created a sandbox, and they encouraged people to come with ideas and experiment with them. Initially, IT department wanted to require a business case, but the CDO pushed back and said, we can't require a business case up front because we're testing the possibilities, we're exploring the opportunities. So they did put in place a stage gate process, but they didn't require that upfront burden of a business model, or business case, so that they could really cast that wide net. Others have done hackathons that have encouraged people to develop new code and to use these new technologies. But then it's really important to put a process in place that prioritizes, that doesn't just let anything that's named AI get funded. So you're not going to fund everything. You're going to put a very strict process in place in order to prioritize. You're going to be deliberate. You're going to be transparent in what that process is. So this is just a simple prioritization framework that puts in place some ground rules. It puts in place some questions to ask, obviously with one axis being alignment with strategic goals. What do you want to achieve within the organization? And one of the important questions to ask there is also, can multiple business units benefit from what we're doing? You might be doing something around sustainability or supply chain for operations, but then maybe an ESG department or a corporate social responsibility department or a marketing department might also want that data in order to promote the company's track record from a sustainability perspective. So looking at how there could be that usability across different use cases is important from that prioritization perspective. And then, of course, the anticipated return. But on the flip side of it, understanding what systems are required, what resources are required, what skills are required, and most importantly, what data is required. So when you're thinking about operationalizing, which is that next step in the journey that I described, do you have the right data in order to achieve what you're looking to achieve? And as one CDO said, data is more valuable than the AI model itself. We're seeing a commoditization, a convergence of AI models, and it's the nuances in that data that's going to differentiate our outcomes. So it's very important to keep in mind. As we say at Snowflake, there is no AI strategy without data strategy, or as Sherlock Holmes said in one of Sir Conan Doyle's books, data, 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 I can't make bricks without clay. So that's the foundation piece. So thinking about your data as you operationalize and eventually expand across the organization, how would you describe your data today? Do you have access to all of your internal data? Have you broken down your silos internally to provide access to that data? Do you have a repository where people can discover and access that data? Have you transformed your unstructured data into data that's usable within analytics today? So IDC used to say that there was about 80% of data within an organization is unstructured, and now they're saying 90%. So we're increasingly seeing data and the information, the insights in it, trapped within videos, emails, other documents. So have you transformed that unstructured data? But also, very importantly, are you sharing data with partners? One CDO said, if I only use my own data, I can only see internally. I need to see regional trends, industry benchmarks, what waves I can ride in on. So think about how you're sharing data to expand the diversity of the data you're using to train your models. And then sourcing external data from third parties, potentially creating synthetic data to mitigate maybe the lack of representation in some of the data sets that you have, and ensuring that your data is protected and well governed. So as you move towards operationalization of your AI strategy, of your AI projects, think about that data foundation that you've got in place. So one of the first steps in getting there is shifting to data product thinking. And this goes back to the alignment with strategic goals that I mentioned and whether or not you're enabling multiple business units to benefit from a specific data product or AI model. So thinking about the data in terms of component products, maybe upstream component products from the sources that are then aggregated into more composite data products like this Customer 360 or like the Product 360. So what you see here is there are multiple component data products that are in both of these composite data products. So if you're looking at the Customer 360, you see that there's sales transaction data. There's also product usage. It's important to know what customers are buying and how they're using the products they're buying. But likewise, if you want a 360 of your product, you'd want to know that same data as well. So it's important to put in place that notion of data product thinking and doing. And that all boils down to data use. So it's designing your data assets so that they can be used as opposed to merely just stored and protected. The next step, which I also mentioned earlier, is about thinking about expanding the diversity of your data. I like to talk about data diversity as a mechanism not just for getting more insights, but for mitigating the risk of hallucination and bias in an AI model. The more data that you provide, the more training that you give, the more likely an AI model is to have an answer to something and not just make it up. So the classic example is hiring. If you're only looking at who you've traditionally hired internally, you might hire the same profile for the same role. But there is data out there that would help you understand what other profiles might fit a particular type of role. And in fact, we are seeing more and more people consume third-party data. And a 2023 Explorium study showed that companies using 5 or more data products from different providers increased from 9% in 2021 to 44% in 2022. So a massive explosion in the use of third-party data, in part because there is this interest in creating data diversity within a data estate, a data foundation. This is just a quick screenshot of a couple of different data categories within the Snowflake marketplace. One is demographics, if you're looking to get more information about your customer data. Another is demand forecasting. You're trying to understand what demand will be in certain markets. You might be interested in weather. You might be interested in supplier data. So there's a wide variety of data that you can pull in to give you greater insights, but also to give you that diversity of data to prevent mitigation or to mitigate potential AI bias. So thinking further about operationalization, one of the ways to coordinate all of that within an organization, to coordinate the reuse, to coordinate the prioritization, to coordinate the governance, and to coordinate that evangelism and experimentation, is to create a center of excellence. So we're seeing a number of our customers set up centers of excellence. Many of them call them different things: an AI catalyst lab, a data council, a variety of different things. It doesn't necessarily need to be a fixed, centralized structure. You can think of it as a constellation, bringing together representation from different business units, from different functions, from different regions. The idea is to bring together stakeholders to rationalize requirements, to coordinate the data products that are being developed, to work collaboratively and in a coordinated fashion through this prioritization or the setting governance policies, defining data terms and data formats. It's a mechanism for coordination. Now, you might have distributed data capabilities across the organization, but in that case, it's very important to coordinate them as well. So just from a semantics perspective, I try to avoid the terms centralization and decentralization. I talk about distribution and coordination. And when you're evangelizing to others, those terms are somewhat softer and they resonate better. Often within those centers of excellence, there's a steering committee that would maybe be at an executive level and might be more responsible for allocating budget or other resources. So one of the things that's really important here is that those centers of excellence or the steering committees or the catalyst labs, they can help facilitate reuse. And I thought this was important because it illustrates that reuse is one of the metrics that people are looking at to measure the effectiveness of their AI initiatives, their AI programs across their organization. Are we able to reuse the data products? Are we able to reuse the AI models? So one of the ways in which, in addition, when companies are looking at how to expand their use of AI across their organization, is reuse and performance metrics. So how do you think about and how do you define those performance metrics of an AI model? Well, I would advocate not thinking of AI just as merely a tool or a technology, but you're looking at how to inject certain capabilities into your organization. You should think of that AI as a new team member, as a new employee. And we know how to measure the performance of employees. We've been doing that forever. We start with what we want that employee to do. We start with the job description. What are we looking for that AI model to deliver to the organization? What's the job description? And then the next thing we do is look for the right candidate. What are the specifications of the employee that we want for that job or that we need for that job? Well, they're chatbots for customer service, they're co-pilots to help us code. We're looking for the right candidate for that job that we've defined within the organization. And then, of course, we're investing in onboarding. We're training that model. And that we might do some initial onboarding, but training is something that we continuously do with our employees as well. It's not just a one and done. So think about the training and the appropriate model, the appropriate data for onboarding and the continuous training of that employee, that new team members. And then, of course, you're establishing the output and the outcome performance metrics. What's the frequency with which you want them to deliver something? But what's the outcome as well? It's not just about the deliverable in a concrete term, it's about the value that's delivered to the organization. And then, of course, it's continuous monitoring and continuous correction, because that's what we do with regular employees as well. So we shouldn't expect the way we engage with our AI models to be any different when we're looking for them to perform within our organizations. So the last thing I want to touch on is how we transform our organizations. How do we embed and inject this AI capability within the DNA of our organization? How do we create a data and AI culture? And I would argue that that comes from continuous communication and education. I talk to chief data officers about their comm strategy. What are you doing to communicate what your team is doing within the broader organization? How do they communicate at what data is, how it's used, which use cases it's applied to, and talk through that performance management that I just described. So what I have found in my research is that it starts with an awareness. There are a lot of people in organizations that don't know what data is today, and you might think that that's not possible given the world we're in, but we're in the data world and not everyone is. I was talking to the chief digital officer of Sodexo a few years ago, and she told me that when they first started looking at the data within their cafeterias, they saw an increase in a particular site, an increase in the sale of breakfast sausage in the morning. And this was in France. People don't eat breakfast sausage in the morning. They eat croissants. So what they found when they dug into this was that the hockey stick corresponded with the replacement of cash registers with point-of-sale machines that had individual buttons for each item. And the cashiers, who probably didn't think they worked with data at all, they were pressing the breakfast sausage button to ring people up and move the line along. Well, that skews the data. If the management had used that data to replenish stocks, the next week the customers would have had nothing but breakfast sausage to eat in the morning. My point there is that if you're not establishing this awareness of what data is, how it's used, and the role that everyone plays within the organization, you're not building that foundation on which you can have the accurate data that you need to build the models, train the models, and deliver those insights into your organization. So The next level is confidence. Obviously, you need to have your decision makers confident that that data is accurate and that they can make decisions based on it. And then you need to keep your experts on the cutting edge. They need to have the latest tools. They need to have the data that they need. But also, thinking about those experts, you need to give them professional development opportunities to share what they're doing across the organization, and that's the feedback mechanism that you get, so that you can scale their expertise, obviously at the appropriate level with the appropriate messages, but you're scaling them across the organization. And that's a professional development opportunity for your data experts, but it's also immense value to the rest of the organization to increase that awareness and to increase that confidence among decision makers. So with that, I'm going to just ask if there are any quick questions.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.